We'll start today's episode with an update on my Bayliner mutiny, where recently I showed you how we replaced the engine, and after building one engine out of the best parts from the two and putting it back into the boat, we were unable to get it to start and run on its own. The starter motor worked fine, there was even some combustion happening, but as soon as I would release the ignition switch, the engine stopped running. The first problem was due to some mixed up cables on the ignition switch, so after solving that, the engine would start and run on its own, but only for a few seconds. I was able to keep the engine running as long as I was pumping gas into it and by that revving up the engine, but as soon as I stopped pumping and the engine revolutions would go down to idle speed, it would shut off after a few seconds. Next I put in brand new spark plugs and new ignition cables. Here you can see the new ones already in place. And with that it worked a tiny little bit better. But it was still unable to remain running at idle speed on its own. I concluded from that there must be an issue with the gasoline supply. So next I put in a new membrane into the fuel pump. Here's the pump already with the new membrane. And so next I can put the pump back on the engine. And I replaced the fuel line by a brand new one. But even after this, the engine would still not remain running at idle speed. So by now, there was nothing else left to do than to remove the carburetors and clean those. And in hindsight, I can say that we should have probably started by that. I got a set of new gaskets, and we're gonna use compressed air to blow out any dust or debris. Here again, since we have a total of 4 carburetors, we're gonna use the best parts from each to build 2 properly working carburetors. And at this point, I would like to give full credit to my friend, who seems to know exactly where which part and which screws need to go, even without any user manual or exploded view drawing. So without him, I couldn't have done it. Now they are ready to be installed back on the engine. So let's fire her up. And then, like a miracle, the engine ran on its own. So now, let's take her for a little test drive. And with that, the story of my Bayliner mutiny finally comes to a happy ending. In a future episode, I will show you a little more how we actually drove it, and I'll also give you a little insight on the condition of the Bayliner and what else there is left in terms of maintenance and repairs. But for now, let's move on to something else. I started a somewhat bigger project, namely I want to build a shelf to put in our Victron Quattro. The shelf should be freely suspended so that we are still able to remove the floor panel underneath and use the space for storage. So I got some steel, and here's what the shape of the shelf will look like. First, I cut the steel angle profiles so I can put them together into the desired shape. And of course, for this job, I'm gonna use our stick welder. As usual, the welds are not great, but good enough. Here is a bit a wider gap, which I was able to fill in after a second passage. Next, let's continue with cutting more angle profiles. And then we weld those together. Now that the frame for the first shelf is finished, I'm gonna make a second one, which will be exactly the same. Here are the finished frames, and I'm very pleased with how they turned out, as they seem to be exactly parallel to each other. With the help of a friend, I'm gonna weld these to the boat. And there you have it. The outer frame of the shelf is finished. And here again I'm very happy with the result, as it seems that they are perfectly parallel to each other. Unfortunately, that's all we have time for today, and you're gonna have to wait for the next episode to see the finished result. A while back, I attempted to reconnect our main diesel tank to the engine. And after removing the existing fitting and emptying the tank, I realized that the adapter they used was of a 3/8 imperial thread, which is very difficult to find here in Europe. So at the time, I did what I thought was my only option, which was to take an adapter that was kind of fitting and to glue it to the tank with 5200 adhesive. And to top it off, I put this little elephant with red ears, which of course was not meant to be used for fuel. After publishing this video, many viewers were so kind to share their insights and explain to me why this setup was nothing short of reckless and in fact just a time bomb waiting to explode. Quite literally. Of course, this didn't sit well with me, and I actually never used the engine in this way. What I did instead was to face the reality that there is no other way than to open the diesel tank and replace that fitting altogether. The tank is covered by a hatch, held in place by 44 bolts. At the time I filmed this, I already had started to see what it's like, and I got a little carried away. So now, let's continue undoing those bolts. Alright, now one last bolt to go. And then I can finally open up the cover. Probably the first time since the boat was built. Let's have a look inside. Yuck! Good thing that I didn't run the engine with this fuel. Anyway, that's all I'm gonna do here for now, because I still need to find the right fitting. If you have any suggestions what kind of fitting to be used, please let me know. And with that, my friends, I'm signing out. Thank you all for watching, and see you in the next video.